Thank you, Shakir. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so as Shakir mentioned, my name is Faheem Zafar, and I'm based in Melbourne, working for a niche dynamics and power platform consulting here. Um, so this is the first time I'm presenting in Tech Day, Pakistan. So basically, the topic today is Copilot, and in within Copilot, you can create plugin actions, and we will see what are plugin actions, what is Copilot, and what this all basically fuss is. So yeah, so as I explained myself, I'm Faheem Zafar. I'm passionate about Microsoft, business applications, Dynamics 365, and Power Platform, and I've been in IT for the last 16 years roughly. So the agenda for today basically is that first we will go through Copilot. What is Copilot? You might have seen Copilot app within Office 365 or basically an add-on in your Edge browser. If you go to Bing search engine, you also have a Copilot button there. You can ask questions from Copilot. As I said, in M365 app, you also have a Teams app as well that is part of M365. And then if you have worked on Power Platform or Dynamics 365, each business application within Dynamics 365 and Power Platform service has inbuilt Copilot. So you have a Copilot for sales, you have a Copilot for customer insight, you have a Copilot for field service as well. And then within Power Platform, you have a Copilot to basically that helps you to create your applications, right? So we will talk about what is Copilot, then Copilot Studio. What is Copilot Studio? Then we will talk about some of the AI features within Copilot Studio, for example, generative AI, dynamic chaining, and intelligent authoring. And then lastly, in the last maybe 30 minutes, I will give you a demo of plugin actions. So as I said, what is Copilot, right? So Copilot, as I said, has different applications. You have a Copilot that is part of M365, as a Teams app. Then you have a Copilot that is part of your Bing browser as a search engine. You have a Copilot that is part of your, for example, Copilot for customer service, Copilot for sales, Copilot for field service, um, Copilot for Business Central as well. So basically, Copilot, I will say Copilot is not one app or is one basically add-on. It's basically a suite of apps and add-ons. And as you can see here, this Copilot wheel. Basically, there are a lot of products of Copilot, and depending on where you are using that product, depending on in which platform you want to use it, you have a Copilot available within that platform, right? So in this session, we will be talking about specifically Copilot Studio, which is something here on the top right side that is part of your Power Platform, right? So we will be talking about Copilot Studio specifically and how you can create your own Copilots. Basically, that's the agenda, right? So creating your own Copilots using Copilot Studio. So if you have been using Power Platform, you might know that we used to have something called Power Virtual Agents. And Power Virtual Agents are now basically Copilot Studio, or you can say Copilots. And the designer to create Power Virtual Agents is now called Copilot Studio. So if you go to the Power Virtual Agents designer for the first time, you will see this nice window here that Power Virtual Agents is now Microsoft Copilot Studio. I will say this sentence is not really correct because Power Virtual Agents were actually our bots. So our bots are now called copilots, whereas the designer basically, which we used to have to create Power Virtual Agents, that designer is now called Copilot Studio, right? One thing I want to say is that this is not only a branding, basically, or rebranding of Power Virtual Agents. What Microsoft has done is that all the investment they had done in Azure OpenAI, they have incorporated all those investments and all those features into that Power Virtual Agents. And now Copilot Studio has all those AI features enabled, which are basically part of Azure OpenAI. Power Virtual Agents as you can see on the screen, they are now Copilot Studio, right? So they are actually Copilots, and that studio which we used to have for Power Virtual Agents is now Copilot Studio. The problem with Power Virtual Agents was that they were very dumb. They were not very smart. You had to, if you remember in Power Virtual Agents, you had to create all those hierarchies, you had to create topics, you had to create, you had to configure all that logic in order to make your bot smart enough to respond to a user query. You had to configure trigger phrases, and then based on those trigger phrases, you had topics, and then under those topics, you had your logic embedded, right? That used to do something. Um, so what has now happened is that, as I said, with all those AI features, for example, generative AI, and we will talk about those in a second. Now, all those AI features are now part of Copilot Studio. So the moment you create your Copilot has all that generative AI and dynamic chaining and other AI features already inbuilt. So you don't have to basically write your, you know, um, intricate logic yourself. Lot of how you say, um, a lot of logic basically, or a lot of uh, computation basically is already part of your Copilot, and we will see that in a second how that works. So what is Copilot Studio? If you remember, you used to have a graphical interface to create your Power Virtual Agents bots. So you have something similar here again, in the form of Copilot Studio. You create your bots. You will see that in a second. Is basically a graphical designer that allows you to create your bots, right? And test your bots as well, and then publish your bots. You create your custom copilots using Copilot Studio, which are called GPTs as well. For example, that Chat GPT is also another GPT, and your copilots that you create using Copilot Studio, they are also GPTs, which are generative pre-trained transformers. And we will see that in a second. What does that mean? It has, as I said, your copilots that you create using Copilot Studio. They now have generative AI and dynamic chaining capability enabled, right? Um, there are some out of the box plugins which you can use, and we will see those in a second, how you can use an out of the box plugin to create your bot or consume in your bot. But if you want to create your own custom plugin, you can also do that. And this is what we're going to see in a second. Build your custom plugin to enable BYOD, bring your own data or bring your own system scenario. Custom Copilot for Microsoft 365. So you can also create your Copilots for M365 as well. And then using Copilot Studio. And then basically it's, as I said, is compatible with Azure OpenAI framework. It's actually using Azure OpenAI framework behind the scene as well. So the skills you create within Azure OpenAI, they are also, you can also use those as plugin actions within Copilot Studio. But in our today's discussion, we're going to focus on how you can create copilots and how you can create a custom plugin action to interact with another line of business application. So as I said, there are few features which are part of Copilot Studio now, and few AI features, artificial intelligence features. And one of them is generative AI. So what is generative AI? Um, Generative AI or Gen AI or GAI, it got a lot of fame in the last 1.5 year since the evolution of ChatGPT. It's basically a pre-trained model that is capable enough to generate text, images, and videos, audios, and other content. Um, the idea here is that you have a trained model, a pre-trained model, and that model, you don't have to train that model. You just have to provide content to that model, and that model, based on its training, is able to create new content, right? So that's GPT. Now, within Copilot Studio, you have generative AI, as I said, already inbuilt. So what you can do is that, and we will see that in a second, there is this feature here, boost conversational coverage with generative answers. When you enable this feature, this toggle button within your copilots, then your copilot is able to, whatever the content you provide to that copilot, in the form of websites, in the form of SharePoint sources, or in the form of files, as you can see here, your PDF or Word or PPT files, Copilot is able to basically go in that content and then respond to user queries, which are also called prompt in layman terms. The next feature is dynamic chaining, and this is a very key feature here, which I want to talk about. This feature currently is in preview stage, and this feature is only available right now in US and UK regions. It's not available in Australian region or in Pakistan region or in Middle East region anywhere. It will be available in other regions apart from UK and US, hopefully in April this year, as per Dynamics wave plan. So just wait for a couple of more months, and you will see this feature available for you. If you go now and open your Copilot settings, you will see this feature disabled. You won't be able to enable this feature. But what is dynamic chaining? What is this feature? And as I said, it's a very important feature. What it does is that if you enable this feature, what your Copilot does is that your Copilot then becomes able to basically drive the logic it needs to execute to respond to user query. So for example, if you have 10 different plugins already configured, your Copilot will be able to basically identify which plugin it needs to execute in order to respond user query. And we will see that in a second how it does that. The last AI feature which I want to talk about is intelligent authoring, and that this might you might have seen in, for example, Canvas app, or for example, model driven app, or for example in Dataverse, you have a Copilot basically running along your within your designer, where you, for example, create your Dataverse tables, and there you basically ask a Copilot to do something, and then it does it, right? For example, in Dataverse, you can say that, can you please create a new table, and then it's able to create a new table with those columns which you specify, right? So you have something similar within Copilot Studio as well. So within Copilot Studio, we are creating copilots, but you have a copilot within Copilot Studio. So you can create your copilots using Copilot, right? It sounds a bit funny, but that's basically what happens. So for example, if you still have to create topics and hierarchies, topics and the logic, questions, trigger phrases, you can do that using Copilot. So you can ask Copilot to create that, and it will do for you. For example, on the left hand side here, I am basically saying that pizza delivery is the topic of my Copilot. I want to create a new topic with the name pizza delivery. And basically, I am describing what this topic will do. And then on the right hand side, as you can see here, Copilot is able to create a basically question. And then it's able to create these choices. And then, it's able to create all those questions and then hierarchy of that. So in a nutshell, basically, you can create your copilots using Copilot. All right, so enough of the talk, and let's now see things in action. So I'll just switch my screen very quickly, and I will show you an environment. Okay, so this environment is in US region. As you can see here, it's in US region. And as I said, Copilot Studio, some of the AI features, for example, dynamic chaining, that feature is currently only available in US and UK regions. So if you're planning to use these features, then you have to wait until April, because that dynamic chaining feature is currently in preview and not available to any other region except US and UK. Right. So I'll go to my Maker portal. If you have worked on Power Platform, you know that you have a Maker portal within your Power Platform where you can create your apps, your chatbots, your cloud flows, and other things that you can create within Power Platform. So you have this thing here called chatbots, and what I'll do is that I will say new chatbot, right? And I have a chatbot here. If you notice that the URL here is Power VA, that means that it is still the same thing, Power Virtual Agents, but it's not only a rebranding, but to Microsoft Copilot Studio, but also now you have AI features within Copilot Studio, right? So I need to provide name for my bot, so I will say Tag Day Park Bot, let's say, or Copilot. the language which I want my Copilot to speak. So there are sort of languages I can choose. I'll select English, you know, and then this is the generative AI feature which I was talking about. It's basically asking me that are there any websites that you want to provide to this bot, and then that the knowledge of those websites will become basically the knowledge of this Copilot. So that Copilot will be able to answer user queries based on the data that's available or based on the content that's available on these websites. So I'll just say, I'll basically select, or in fact, I will not select anything here. I will click on edit advanced options. And as you can see here, now the copilots basically, the bots that you create using Copilot Studio, they are solution aware. So you can basically add these copilots to a specific solution so that you can have a proper ALM, methods for your bots as well. ALM stands for Application Lifecycle Management, and solution basically allows you to deploy your components from one environment to another environment, right? So I'll just select Copilot Studio Demo as a solution, and this will be the schema name of my bot. And this might take few seconds for the Copilot Studio to create our Copilot. And sometime it takes 30 to 40 seconds. Sometimes it's very quick. So it all depends how much time it's gonna take today. Yeah, I'll just refresh this window here. Okay, looks like it's creating. Okay, there you go. So my my Copilot has been created. There are some features which are still being configured by Copilot Studio. And now I can see this nice green message here. Your bot is provisioned, right? So now if I ask my Copilot, because as I said, Copilot, it has AI or generative AI features already inbuilt, so it should be able to answer me, answer my questions. If I ask my Copilot, do you know anything about PL 200 exam? And by the way, PL 200 exam is basically a Microsoft exam at an intermediate level. If you are planning to understand Power Platform, and if you want to learn Power Platform, then you should go for this exam. It's a very useful exam if you want to upskill on Power Platform and Dynamics 365, right? So I'll ask this question: do you know anything about PL 200? And it says that I don't know. Sorry, I'm not sure how to help with that. Can you try rephrasing, right? So this means that my bot doesn't have the knowledge to answer this question, right? So how I can provide this knowledge to my bot? I need to go to generative AI, right? And if I click on generative AI under settings, then I will go down and I need to click on this button here, boost conversational coverage with generative answers. And along with that, I will also enable dynamic chaining as well. And this feature we will see in a second. But to answer this question, I am relying on basically this feature here. I need to enable this feature, boost conversational coverage with generative answers. And once I do that, then once I have saved these changes, and I can see this message here, changes saved. And then if I ask the same question again, I'll just copy if I can and paste it here. And apologies, it is still doesn't know. It's saying that do you want to escalate to live agent? Because we have enabled the feature, but we haven't specified the knowledge. So we need to specify the knowledge. So I'll click on generative AI, and here basically here where we can specify the websites. So I'll go to, for example, this site here, and MSLN Dynamics 365, and I will select this URL and I will enter here. And as you can see here, we can only specify URLs with 2 level and depth. And I will add this site, and then I will save. And if I say restart, and then if I ask this question again, do you know anything about PL 200 exam? And hopefully our bot will be able to answer this question, but it looks like it's getting a bit confused. It's not able to answer our question. I'll say no, and I'll say, can you try again? Okay, looks like we need to maybe refresh. Looks like it's just doing something. Okay, perfect. So now I think it took bot some Copilot some time to basically go through the site and then index all the content and then being able to answer this, answer user questions. So as you can see here now, bot is saying the PL200 exam is part of Microsoft Power Platform Functional Consultant Certification and so on, right? So it's getting all this content basically from this website. And as you can see here on this page, this content is not there, but this content is somewhere at some page on this website, right? So the bot is smart enough to basically iterate all the content within that site and then answer user prompts or user queries, right? So that's how that is basically generative AI because we haven't configured any topic. We haven't specified any trigger phrase. We haven't specified any logic to iterate that content and fetch that content and respond to user query. The bot is doing it on its own because it has that Azure Azure OpenAI already built in, right? I need some water maybe. So, okay, so this is basically generative AI, right? Now, the next question I want to ask my co-pilot. And as you can see here, surface with Azure OpenAI. So this means that as I was saying, the Copilot is using Azure OpenAI. If I zoom in a little bit, the Copilot is using Azure OpenAI basically behind the scene to basically iterate this content from the website and then answer user queries. The next question I will ask is, what's the weather today in Melbourne, right? And this time again, since we haven't specified this, we haven't given this knowledge to our co-pilot. So our co-pilot doesn't understand how to answer this question. It's saying, I'm sorry, right? So how we can basically make our co-pilot smart enough to answer this question, right? So how we can do that is we can do it through plugin actions, right? So if I click on topics and plugins, as I was saying, within Copilot, you create your topics and hierarchies, and some of these topics are created by default. For example, hello, goodbye, greeting, thank you, start over. So these topics are basically created by default when you create a new Copilot. And then using the same principle, you can create your own topics as well. But the agenda for today's meeting is not to create topics because that's not a new thing. That's a old thing. What we have now basically are plugin actions because we want to extend our Copilot capability to and make this Copilot smart enough to interact with other systems, right? And for that, you have plugin actions. So if I click on plugin action, and if I click on create button, then I can create topic or I can create plugin action. I can also create Microsoft Copilot plugin. So this basically plugin is plugin for M365 Copilot, as I was saying earlier. But currently we're talking about Copilots that are created using Copilot Studio, which is this. And we need to click on this plugin action, right? So I click on plugin action, and what I will do is that, as I said earlier, either you create your own plugin actions or you basically consume out of the box, something that is available out of the box. So in this environment, as you can see here, I have this plugin action, which is get forecast for today. So whenever you basically enable, Copilot Studio, you will get few plugin actions already configured out of the box. And one of this is this. One of those plugins is this get forecast for today, MSN weather. If I click on this plugin action, um, then basically that thing was a connect. It's a connector, and what I'm doing now is creating a plugin action that will use this connector, right? Um, I'll just need to say next. So this connector is taking few inputs and outputs. It's taking location as an input and units as an input, and it's so two inputs, and it does not have any output, but it's basically saying that respond to user after running this action. So when Copilot will execute this action, it will respond to user query on its own because we are saying yes, respond to user after running this action, yes, right? I can say that to no as well. If I click on edit and then change this to no, I will not do it. I just want to talk about this thing very quickly, inputs. So we have two inputs here, location and units. What we are saying here is that if I click on edit, so we have two inputs. First one is location. The second one is unit. What we are saying is that identify this input as user's entire response. So this means that, and here, how will the bot fill this input? So against this question, we have few options. We have dynamically fill with best option or set a value. So basically what we are telling here by selecting dynamically fill with best option is that when user will write something, the copilot will dynamically identify location from that statement. We are not passing it as a variable or as an input explicitly. We are saying that we are asking the copilot to identify that from the statement or from the question or from the query, which is also called prompt, right? So from the prompt, the copilot, we are asking that copilot, it needs to fill location input, and similar thing for unit as well, right? So this is some configuration that's available here. And I'll say finish now, um, so that we can see this in action. So this connector basically get MSN weather get forecast for today. It will give me today's weather. It also actually gives tomorrow's weather as well. So maybe this name needs to be changed. Um, but yeah, so this connector basically will give me weather forecast. Okay, so now this plugin action has been created based on MSN weather get forecast for today action, right? Oh, sorry, connector. Now if I ask the same question, what's the weather today in Melbourne? And I can see Adnan has joined. Hi, Adnan. Um, and if I now ask the same question, what's the weather today in Melbourne? Then what's the weather today in Melbourne? Then my co-pilot will be able to answer this question that today's weather in Melbourne is sunny and temperature is 69 Fahrenheit and blah, 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 right? So as you can see here, the co-pilot, if I enable tracing as well, as you can see here, dynamic chaining log, and then the co-pilot is able to identify that it needs to execute this plugin, right? So this is dynamic chaining. The co-pilot is smart enough. If we enable dynamic chaining, it knows that to answer this user's query, it needs to execute a specific plugin, right? So it may have 100 or 200 or 300 different plugins or thousands of plugins, and it knows that which plugin it needs to execute to answer user query. What we just need to do is that we need to configure that plugin, right? So that's the most important thing. Now, so that's good. We have used generative AI. We have seen how Copilot can iterate or index a site's content and answer user queries. We have seen how you can consume existing connectors and create your plugin action, right? But what if you have your line of business application? For example, your field service app. If you know field service is a module within Dynamics 365 CE, customer engagement platform. So you have customer service, you have field service, you have sales, you have data insights and data journey, customer journeys and data journeys, which were previously called marketing. So field service is just another app within Dynamics 365, right? You can have another apps as well. For example, you have your SAP application or your, you know, Zoho CRM application or any other application. What if you want to query data from those external applications through your Copilot, right? So for that, we need to create our custom plugins. And to do that, I need to go back to plugins area. So I need to click on plugin actions and I need to click on create and plugin action. And this time, instead of selecting one of these from here, I need to click on plus and create a new flow. Flow, as you know, that flow, it's a legacy name. Now they are called Power Automate. But basically, Power Automates is basically it's a service within Power Platform that allows you to create your workflows, and you can connect to thousands of different systems using Power Automate. Um, so basically, what it is saying is that you can create your plugin action that can call a flow to get the data, right? So create a new flow. So I'll say create a new flow, and then it will redirect me to Power Automate Designer. And by default, it will enable Power Automate Designer. It will open Power Automate Designer in new mode, which is a bit different than the current mode that we have. If I toggle this back to if I untoggle this new designer button from here, then it will go back to the legacy mode. Um, but this is basically Power Automate, right? So important thing here is that we have one trigger here, run a flow from Copilot, and we have one action here, respond to Copilot. So this flow will get some input from the Copilot, and we need to configure that, and it will respond back uh, to Copilot. And we also need to configure that as well, what we want to give back to Copilot. Um, so I will not, just to save this time, I will not configure this whole Power Automate flow, from scratch. What I will do is that um, I already have configured a flow here, which is this one here, get work order status. And I will show you this, what this flow is doing. As you can see, this Power Automate symbol. So this connector was created using Power Automate flow. That is, that happens when you click on this create a new flow here button, right? I'll just go back and in my environment, I have this shared with me, get work order status. So this is the a flow. This is a flow that I created before this session, and you can also do the same thing when you click on create a new flow. It will give you a designer as I showed, and in that Power Automate designer, you can configure your flow, right? So what this flow is doing, let's open this. So in this flow, you will see that you have a trigger, run a flow from Copilot, right? And this trigger has an input, work order. So what I want to achieve is that um, within field service, we have something called work orders. And basically work orders are, your jobs which your field staff need to perform. They are called work orders. You basically create work orders, as you can see here, and then you assign those work orders to your resources, and then your resources go to their site and then perform those, work orders or jobs, right? So that's field service. As I said, it's part of Dynamics 365. I will not talk about field service a lot, but what I want to do in my Copilot is that I want my Copilot to answer user queries about the status of work orders, right? I want my Copilot to answer user queries, um, based on the status of the work order. So, for example, if I say that, what's the status of work order 0011? It should be able to tell me the status completed, right? If I open it, um, then we start the work order status is completed. If I go back and if I ask my Copilot what's the status of 00009, it should give me the answer that work order status 00009 is scheduled, right? So this is just an example. But using the same principle, you can actually create any kind of flow that can do anything within any line of business application, right? And then you can call that flow using plugin action. And then when user, you query Copilot, and then Copilot will be able to call that action and answer user's question if if it if it has the right configuration. And we will see those in a second, right? So the idea here is that um, if I go back to this Power Automate flow, as I said, in this Power Automate, um, basically there is this trigger, run a flow from Copilot. It's basically it has one variable here, input variable here, work order. So um, as I said, I want to basically ask my Copilot what's the status of this XYZ work order. So I need to provide work order as an input. So what I'm doing here is that, taking an input work order, and then I am querying through fetch XML. So fetch XML is just a language, basically XML based language that allows you to fetch data from Dataverse, as you might know, right? So what I'm doing here is that I am querying work order table, and I am checking if my name field is equals to work order number, the input variable that comes from this trigger, right? And if that happens, then I get those rows. I initialize a variable status, var status. Its value is unknown by default. And then I check whether the rows I have got from the Dataverse, basically they have a row where the name is equals to work order, because I should only get one row because the name field is auto generated, so it's always unique. But this is a very rough logic. Just get all the rows and then get one row that matches the work order number. And then if that happens, then I set my variable which I initialize here. I set it here, var status with the status, right? The formatted value of a status, which is basically the nice display name, not the backend numeric value. So this is what my Power Automate is doing, and then it's responding back to the Copilot that status is that var status, the variable that I get or set here, and then I basically assign that variable back to a output parameter status, and that this action basically will pass status back to Copilot, right? So this is what this Power Automate flow is doing. So what I'll do is that I will select this Power Automate flow, and as I said, you can create this Power Automate flow by just clicking that Create New Flow button. And it is here basically it's saying that which flow I want to execute. So get work order status, that's the flow. As you can see here, get work order status, and I'll just say next. And then here, this is the input variable. So because my Power Automate needs input variable work order, so I need to basically configure that here, right? So once again, I want my Copilot to fill this input work order dynamically based on um, based on the user prompt, right? So user entire response, and fill this work order dynamically and get the value from the user statement and populate work order and then pass it to flow, right? I need to provide some description here. So for example, I need to say, what is this? This is actually work order, right? And then I'll say example. This is, for example, 00001. That's my work order, right? And I'll save it. And once again, I am not getting any output, but let's say if you have a flow that needs to give you some output and then you pass that output to another action or plugin action, you can also do that using outputs. But once again, I'm saying here, respond to user after ending this action. So I'm saying yes. So this means that user will be able to um, get the response from when this plugin action is executed. And then lastly, dynamic chaining is enabled, right? So when I enable this, that means that my Copilot will be able to dynamically will be able to identify that it needs to execute this plugin and then get the response and then display on the screen, right? So I'll say finish. And okay, so as you can see here, now we have two plugin action, one for weather to get weather information, because we can get weather information as you can see here on the screen. For example, what's the weather in Karachi? So it should be able to give me the answer. Weather in Karachi is sunny as usual. And what about Lahore? So let's ask about Lahore as well, a non-city. Um, Okay, so weather in Lahore is also mostly sunny, right? Um, so yeah, so just like weather forecast plugin, now we also have work order status plugin that is not calling any external system. It's basically within our Dataverse environment, a field service app. That's another app, as I said, within Power Platform. So the database is Dataverse, but you can also configure your plugin action that can call any external app as well. Um, so here, if I now ask my Copilot, do you know the status of work order 00009? And perfect. So as you can see here, the work order, the Copilot is able to basically execute get work order status, a plugin action that we just created, and give me this nice answer, very nicely formatted answer in a very human way, that the status of work order 00009 is scheduled. So this means that this scheduled, this word here, it has got from this workflow, Power Automate flow, and it has created this whole sentence on its own. Now, notice one thing interesting here. If I say, and what about 00010, it will still it will still be able to answer this question. Okay, so the answer is here unscheduled. Um, but I noticed that because it's a very new technology, sometimes you don't get very nice response, in this human way or natural language way. You get a bit more, this XML or JSON formatted response, but you still have a response here. If you can see here, status is unscheduled, right? And it's calling this plugin action, plugin execution. This is a plugin name. The input is this one. That's the example, and the input is this one. So it's basically able to call this plugin, but not able to give me the answer this time in this natural language way. But you got the idea, right? It's able to execute this plugin. The idea here is that using generative AI and using dynamic chaining, you can actually make your bots very smart, because now they have Azure OpenAI, you know, Azure Azure OpenAI technology inbuilt. So all these generative AI features are there. You don't have to create your trigger phrases. You don't have to create your hierarchy of topics and logics and all that. You just have to write your plugin actions, you know, to get the data or do something in that system. And your Copilot basically is smart enough using dynamic chaining and generative AI to answer user queries and to basically do the action. So for example, if I have a plugin, if I have a workflow here, if I write a plugin action and that uses a workflow that, for example, if I say that, can you schedule work order um, 0000009, and if this work order is not scheduled yet, for example, then, and if you have that flow, then your Power Automate your Copilot will be able to basically schedule um, that work order as well. So the idea here is that, um, basically, you can do a lot of stuff here. You can create bots which are very smart, which can execute actions, plugin actions on their own, um, and you don't have to write all those complex logics. Um, maybe just let's ask this question once again. And what about 00010? I just want to get a nice, natural language answer in a natural language way. Um, okay, so that's sometime happens. I'll just refresh maybe into know the status of.
You have another 5 minutes to go, Faheem.
Okay, thank you, Shakir. So 00, okay, 09. Okay, perfect. So it's saying the status of work order 00009 is scheduled, which is correct. Which is correct. Schedule, the status is scheduled, right? So yeah, so if the other thing is that if I just wanted to show you that it basically keeps that context. So just like chat gpt, if you go to chat gpt, and ask something, and then you ask about the same thing but don't give the whole information, it keeps that context, right? So the same thing here happens here as well. If I now ask, and what about 0000 or 00010, right? Once again, so notice that this time I haven't provided work order. I haven't said, and what about work order with number xyz, right? I'm just saying, what about 00010? So it means that it's keeping the context. It knows that it needs to execute this particular plugin action, which it has get work order status, and basically this is the work order number. So it has that, all those generative AI smartness inbuilt already, and that's basically a game changer um, within Copilot Studio. So yeah, so that's basically the session, the demo which I wanted to present today. And the key thing here is that dynamic chaining and generative AI, using these two things, which are inbuilt in Copilot Studio, you can create very smart bots. And these bots are smart enough to basically, identify which topics or plugin actions they need to execute, and which content they need to iterate to answer user query, right? Yeah, that's basically what I wanted to present. And thank you so much for listening and attending this session. Um, so yeah, so as you know, my name is Faheem, and I'm available, on LinkedIn. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, I do blog. I write blogs as well, so that's my blog site. And if you have any question or query regarding Copilot or anything about Power Platform or Dynamics, please shoot your questions to this email address, or you can message me on LinkedIn as well. Um, yeah, that's basically it from my side. Thank you so much, everyone, and
Thank
see you
you,
next time.
Fahim. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your session. Yes, wonderful session from your side. Quite quite a good session. And thank you again for taking time out. And I know it's quite late, and you need to go to bed to attend your office tomorrow. And yeah, thanks a lot, Fahim.